Okay, we can start the meeting. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Morning.
Notice of special meeting. It's 8:07 a.m. Wednesday, April 1st, 2020. Is open session, executive session, fiscal officer operations, and transition. The Beavercreek Township Board of Trustees will conduct a special meeting remotely by video conference on Wednesday, April 1st, 2020 at 8:07 a.m. The purpose of the meeting is to meet in open session to discuss and act on COVID-19 operations, fiscal officer operations, and transition and executive session per Ohio Revised Code Section 121.22 G1 to consider the employment and compensation of public employees. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic and consistent with the Ohio House Bill 197, this meeting is being conveyed remotely by video conference. The meeting will be viewed live at Beavercreek Township YouTube site, https://YouTube/5U1LY6PYIFW.
I'll make a motion to go in executive session under revised code section 121.22 G1 to consider the employment and compensation of public employees.
I second.
Trustee Dean. Roll call. Trustee Dean.
Yes.
Trustee Kretz.
Yes.
Trustee Wallace.
Yeah.
Thank you, board. Give me a second and I'll transition. Okay, go ahead.
We are now reconvening after executive session. I need a motion, please.
Make a motion to reconvene at 9:39 a.m.
I second.
Trustee Kretz.
Yes.
Trustee Dean.
Yes.
Trustee Wallace.
Yes.
Well, thank you, board. Looking to your packet, presented for your consideration are 4 job descriptions for personnel in the fiscal office. The job descriptions are written. Every position is titled the assistant to the fiscal officer and their focus. My recommendation to the board is to adopt these 4 job descriptions, one being the financial manager, who would run the day-to-day operations of the fiscal office and manage the employees of the fiscal office, which would include the accounts payable specialist, the payroll specialist. The 4th employee would be an assistant to the fiscal officer, who would, in theory, report directly to me, working with the financial manager. What I did was the job descriptions will be formatted in the proper township formatting to be consistent with township practices. The motion does mention that. In addition, the recommendation would be to have these positions fully vetted through the traditional HR process. All these job descriptions have been reviewed by the township's HR department, legal, as well as the township administrator. So it's my recommendation, if there's any questions, is to approve the 4 job descriptions as presented following the motion in the packet.
Thank you, Mr. Rushing. Are there any discussion?
Ryan, as far as from a budget impact, you've gone through and you've analyzed with the township administrator as far as what the budget impact will be. And you've looked at that and you're confident from a standpoint of, A, we have the funds, or do we need to reappropriate any funds to cover, obviously you're not going to have a full year of this expense. You'll have a partial year. So, but do we need to do any reallocation before we actually hire any of these people?
That's a good question. I have done a drafted amended 2020 fiscal officer budget, which I believe the board has now. What that would do is my recommendation based off the current practice of the appropriations. The township has appropriated by fund level. Currently, would that fund level be sufficient to absorb my recommendations? As you mentioned, Trustee Kretz, these positions, as I have them in the amended fiscal officer budget, I appropriate them and budgeted them as if they started January 1. We know that obviously today's April 1. These positions would not be filled for several months to be posted, interviewed, and go through the HR process. If there are needs for different line items to be added to the accounting software, that may need additional board approval. But as of right now, I do not foresee that.
Okay. The only other, I guess, comment I had was just in appreciation for what you're doing, Ms. Wallace, and previously Mr. Roberts and I, we encouraged past fiscal officer to bring in additional resources to A, to get caught up, and B, to spread the workload. We encouraged that number of times as trustees, and that was never acted upon. So I understand we have some situations right now where the township, you're inheriting essentially a good handful of challenges that you need to clean up. And so at least on behalf of myself and hopefully the board, I wholeheartedly support what you're trying to do as far as bring in these resources to get us caught up, and then develop a plan, with staff in your department that really serves the township's internal and external customers. We can't have vendors and suppliers paid late, and we need to be on top of our payroll issues because they continue to grow. So, but thank you for at least considering and embracing what the board has requested in the past. So.
Well,
And I would agree with that with Mr. Kretz and say that as we just found out that this is the second year that our bills are being paid late, 90 days or more. And so hopefully with the new actions that you will be taking to assist you, we hope that all the payroll and bills are paid on a timely manner from the fiscal office in the future.
Thank you.
And I agree as well. And I appreciate all of the research that I know you put into coming up with a plan to move forward with the fiscal office.
Hearing no other comments or questions, I'd like to have a motion, please.
I make a motion to approve the pending final township formatting the fiscal office positions, financial manager, accounts payable specialist, payroll specialist, and assistant to the fiscal officer job descriptions as presented.
Second.
Trustee Kretz,
Yes.
Trustee Dean,
Yes.
and Trustee Wallace.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Rushing. That I think was going to move us forward and get us caught up. And I think that you will do an excellent job in putting us whole again.
Well, thank you, Ms. Wallace. The second item I have for the board, and thank you, board, is a motion in your packet to authorize myself as fiscal officer to contract with Robert Half account temps for 2 additional full-time temps. As I mentioned in the previous discussion, although my goal is to post the job descriptions and go through the appropriate HR processes to bring in additional staff to fill that void and to be proactive to get the fiscal office caught up and to assist the current staff and the current temp that is in the office, my recommendation to the board is to adopt this motion for 120 days, which will give up to 4 months of additional time to go through the proper HR procedures. And in light of the COVID-19 scenario that the whole country, the whole world is in, hiring right now would be difficult. So by having these additional temps, we can continue the productivity, continue to make sure that our financial and statutory obligations are met to get personnel in immediately to keep the wheels turning. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. My goal is to have up to 2 additional full times and to keep the current account temp that's currently in the position that the board previously authorized, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, through the end of April. So if there's a motion, I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Are there any questions from the board? Hearing no questions?
Well, I got a question. So Ryan, typically when we approve this, and I don't have the copy of the resolution that we approved for account temps, but typically we approve a dollar amount and an amount, either a dollar amount in hours per week and a term for, so in this case, like you say, 120 days. I don't know if we have, so there's kind of 2 prongs to this motion. One is to add 2 full-time temps, and the other is to extend the current. Extending the current is easy. As far as adding 2, under what parameters would we be adding them? As far as, do you have a pay range?
Well, board, if I recommend, I would just say as same as last time. It makes it that simple, so it fits in the same parameters that you approved before. So if you want to amend the motion to say for
you have
not to exceed 120 days with the same parameters that were
extend is easy, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
and then adding 2 under the same parameters.
yeah.
What's the date of that motion? Do we know?
I could not find because all the minutes are not been uploaded to our website, so I could not find it yesterday. So the motion I prepared is keeping it simple. If you want to add that little caveat at the end, that would surely fine. It'll fit in the same parameters.
Okay. Do we know when the original was going to expire? Because we're adding 120 days to what?
Yeah, it was going to expire. I think when you approved it last year, knowing that there was going to be a change in the fiscal officer position, I think we had that position until the end of April. So,
say again.
it was
At the end of it.
Okay. I didn't know if I thought somebody, Don, or do we know that?
That's my recollection. We did it through the end of April because of the transition.
Okay. So we're going to extend it 120 days beyond April 30th is my point. Not from today. Okay. And then the 2 additional are, when is the start date? Whenever they're hired for 120 days?
We can do that, or we can be consistent with the current temp and make it through 120 days through from April 30th. And I'm completely comfortable with the same parameters as the previous resolution or motion if there was one.
Right. My concern is obviously if you're able to get somebody for next week, I don't know that you will, but if we said on the 2 additional, if we start them today and then 100.
The clock starts ticking.
Plus 120 days. So technically it would be 150 days. Theoretically, we'd approve the 2 additional for 150 from starting today, and we would extend the current one 120 from April 30th. Is that right?
Correct. That would match up for them.
That gives you 150 days for 3 people if you can find the other 2.
Correct.
Okay. You guys, Ms. Wallace, Ms. Dean, does that make sense to you?
It does.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll take a stab at the motion, and Alex. Actually, I'll make a stab at this. So I'll make a motion to authorize the fiscal officer to contract with Robert Half Account Temps for 2 additional full-time temporary positions at the same pay rate and hours as the current account temps position for a period not to exceed 150 days from April 1st, 2020, and to extend the current account temps position for a period not to exceed 120 days following the expiration of that current contract, which is set to expire April 30th.
I second.
Trustee Dean,
Yes.
Trustee Kretz,
Yes.
and Trustee Wallace.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Board. The following item is an actual resolution. My recommendation is to read the resolution in full into the record. For our meeting with legal as well as the administrator and viewing previous board meetings, it's my understanding that at the recommendation of the IPA firm that conducts the statutory audit of Beavercreek Township, the recommendation was to provide a resolution to adopt the compensation of any fiscal office staff as prescribed by Ohio Revised Code. What this resolution, if adopted, what it would do, it would set the compensation and my recommendation to the assistant to fiscal officer, financial manager, Jan Schultz, and to compensate her based off of the prior approved compensation reward program as a board policy, starting that position at grade 9, the midpoint.
Ms. Dean, I'll take a stab at this one, if that's okay with you. I'll make a motion to approve a resolution to set the compensation of the assistant to the fiscal office / financial manager. Whereas on or about June 21st, 2016 and July 18th, 2016, Ms. Ahrens hired 2 individuals to fill positions of lead assistant, Janice Schultz, and accounts payable payroll, Tina Baer, respectively. Ms. Baer resigned as accounts payable payroll, and Ms. Ahrens hired a new individual for the accounts payable payroll, Cindy Tagg, position on June 12, 2017. Whereas Ms. Tagg resigned, and on August 29th, 2017, the position of accounts payable payroll was again filled with Brittany Johns until she resigned in early 2018. And on March 30th, 2018, Ms. Ahrens hired Cheryl Macesso as the assistant to fiscal officer accounts payable payroll position. Ms. Macesso resigned on or around June of 2019. Whereas as a result of the decision of the Ohio Supreme Court in the Ohio Supreme Court related to Beavercreek Township fiscal officer versus Graff et al. 2018-Ohio-3749, the court issued a writ of mandamus ordering the Board of Trustees to rescind resolutions 2016-158 and 2016-159. Accordingly, on September 24th, 2018, the Board of Trustees rescinded those resolutions. And whereas on December 10th, 2018, an audit and exit meeting conducted by BHM CPA Group, Ms. Ahrens was advised to submit resolutions for the hiring of the fiscal office employees immediately. And whereas the former fiscal officer, Christy Ahrens, did not bring any new resolution to the Board of Trustees for the hiring and employment of any fiscal office employees, and thus there are no resolutions hiring of any current or formal fiscal office employees since 2016. Pursuant to Revised Code 507.021, this must be done by the fiscal officer and not the board. And whereas on November 5th, 2019, Ryan Rushing was elected as the Beavercreek Township fiscal officer and was sworn in on March 27th, 2020 to take office on April 1st, 2020. And whereas to maintain the continuity and operations of the fiscal office, Janice Schultz currently serves as the assistant to the fiscal officer. And it is the desire of the fiscal officer for Ms. Schultz to serve as assistant to fiscal officer / financial manager. And whereas pursuant to section 507.021A of the Ohio Revised Code, the fiscal officer is seeking prior approval of the Board of Trustees to set the compensation of the assistant to the fiscal officer, financial manager. And whereas the fiscal officer utilized the adopted Beavercreek Township compensation and reward program policy as the basis of said compensation recommendation and set the position to the midpoint of grade 9. Now, therefore, be it resolved that pursuant to Ohio Revised Code 507.021, the Board of Trustees does hereby approve the starting salary of the Assistant Fiscal Officer Financial Manager, effective April 1, 2020 at $63,250, and shall be at cost allocated 14% to the general fund, 9% to the road fund, 77% to the fire fund. If a fiscal year shall have an additional pay period, the incumbent shall be paid the same computed biweekly amount as a normal 26-pay fiscal year. Further be it resolved that all formal actions of the Board of Trustees concerning and relating to the adoption of this resolution are being adopted at a duly called and authorized open meeting of the Board of Township Trustees on the date set forth above, such meeting being duly called pursuant to and in compliance with all legal requirements, including Section 121.22 of the Ohio Revised Code.
I second.
Trustee Kretz,
Yes.
Trustee Dean,
Yes.
Trustee Wallace.
Yes.
Thank you.
Nice job, Mr. Kretz.
Thank you. Moving to the following resolution in the packet. This is a resolution that would authorize myself as fiscal officer to enter into a contract with a third-party CPA firm to conduct what's known as an agreed upon procedure, or an AUP. An agreed upon procedure is just account speak to solicit the third-party expertise of a CPA firm to review and compile needed areas that I would deem necessary to delineate my service as fiscal officer from any previous service of the past incumbent. What I'm recommending to the board is to authorize an agreed upon procedure that would allow the hiring of a CPA firm to review and or compile the financial statements of the township. As the board, I'm sure, is aware, previous financial statements has had several adjustments as well as schedule of findings. So my practice is to use a third party to assist and or review the financial statements, as well as to do the same for any bank reconciliation. I have reached out to several area CPA firms that either through my professional groups or personally have worked with in other capacities. I have not received a dollar-for-dollar quote, so it's my recommendation to set the contract to not to exceed $5,000. Obviously, if that were to be needed to increase for any reason, I would come back to the board to seek additional authorization for that. But my recommendation is to read this similarly into the record and to have the amount not to exceed $5,000.
Was there any discussion?
Mr. Ryan, or Mr. Rushing, sorry. So kudos for doing this. Again, Ms. Wallace will recall that Ms. Wallace and Mr. Roberts and I requested this to be done previously. So we had issues last year with accounts payable. My question is, I understand that as of right now, our former fiscal officer did not enter any data into the state of Ohio's UAN system. So this board has not received any financial reports this year. It's my understanding that there's no data essentially for January, February, or March of 2020 in the Unified Accounting Network system, and that we are unable to essentially write a check for the township to any supplier, and that we have to essentially go to a bank and get a certified check to draw on our account to pay suppliers. And that regretfully, do we know how much money is in the township checkbook as of today?
The actual journal ledger, I would not have an answer to that. I don't believe it'd be unable to reconcile that. Obviously, the township would know the bank balances better than the bank balances. Not having accounting software live or active, we would not know that as of today.
Right. And so as far as our total accounts payable liability, our total, as far as tracking the revenue that's come in from the county to date, I personally think this is, my opinion, this is critical so that you start off, number one, we document the past so that we have a clear delineation. And number two, you can move forward with confidence that you know where you started from. There's no way to figure out where the heck you're going if you don't know where you've been. So this hopefully will give you that. So I don't know. That's my opinion, and just historical reference of why I would approve this. So.
I move to adopt a resolution to enter into a contract for an agreed upon procedure to review and or compile financial statements and bank reconciliations. Whereas on November 5th, 2019, Ryan A. Rushing was elected as Beavercreek Township Fiscal Officer and was sworn in on March 27th, 2020 to take office on April 1st, 2020. And whereas due to statements made by former Fiscal Officer Christy Ahrens at March 9th, 2020 meeting regarding the operations and status of the financial office, including unpaid and past due invoices to certain vendors and or other entities owned by the township, and whereas Mr. Rushing desires to ensure the integrity of the Beavercreek Township finance effective April 1st, 2020, and assist with transition services and delineation to distinguish financial activity prior to April 1st, 2020 and subsequent to April 1st, 2020. And whereas Mr. Rushing requests the authority to enter into a contract with third-party CPA firm to review or compile financial statements and bank reconciliations moving forward. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Trustees does hereby authorize the fiscal officer to enter into a contract with third-party CPA firm to review and or compile financial statements and bank reconciliations moving forward in the amount not to exceed $5,000, and further be it resolved that all former actions of the Board of Trustees concerning and relating to the adoption of this resolution are being adopted at a duly called and authorized open meeting of the Board of Township Trustees on the date set forth above, such meeting being duly called pursuant to and in compliance with all legal requirements, including section 121.22 of the Ohio Revised Code.
Second.
Trustee Dean,
Yes.
Trustee Kretz,
Yes.
Trustee Wallace.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Board. Moving right along, there is a motion in the packet. This motion was a service that our current CPA firm, BHM, again, the firm that conducts the statutory audits of Beavercreek Township, they have a service for the transition and onboarding of new fiscal officers that they offered as a service to Beavercreek Township that they have conducted in previous townships. Although this is beneath the $2,500 limit for spending, I felt the need to bring it to the board for disclosure and for transparency to make a motion. My recommendation is to allow us to utilize these services from BHM CPA firm for the transition services of me coming in as a new fiscal officer for an amount of $2,000.
Thank you, Mr. Rushing. We have any discussion on this proposal?
I have no issue with it. It's standard best practice when you convert to a new accounting software to essentially have it do exactly this. So I have no issue with that. I'll make a motion to approve purchase request 10436 to BHM CPA Group for agreed upon procedures related to the township's new accounting software in the amount of $2,000.
I second.
Trustee Kretz,
Yes.
Trustee Dean,
Yes.
and Trustee Wallace.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much. Mr. Rushing, do you have any other things to discuss?
At this time, the only other item, which would be later, is the recommendation of the Investment Oversight Committee to recommend a new depository agreement, but that will be later in the agenda.
All right, thank you. Sure. Zaharia.
Yeah, Board, there has been a request and discussion about changing the rest of the year regular trustee meetings to the evening to accommodate everybody's schedule. Talking over with staff regarding this and time in regards to attending the meetings, I would recommend that if we do change the meeting times from our current 1 p.m. meeting to start no later than 5:30. So if we did a time either 5 or 5:30 or even later than that, 6 would be fine. But I think and this will also assist with when we do public hearings as well, we can include them as a part of our regular agenda. So public hearings in regards to any zoning actions, which we have one coming up on the 13th for 2 text amendments on the signs and pool covers. So in regards to staff perspective, 5 or 5:30 would be fine.
Alex, what our staff's works till 5 p.m. right now?
Excuse
Correct.
me, you broke up there for a second.
I'm sorry. Staff's normal hours are staff is around till the department heads are there till 5 p.m.
No, the road department staff for the department head is 7 to 3:30. The rest of the staff is 4:30, and we have one staff member that does work till 6. So that would be department heads that come to the meeting. So in regards to those meetings, there's no overtime or comp time liability. These are salaried positions. So as the current township policy is, they would alter their schedule either for that day or flex their time later in the week to accommodate for those hours after hours meetings.
Okay. Mr. Rushing, are you okay with 5 p.m. or would you prefer 5:15 or 5:30? What works for you?
My recommendation would be 5:30. However, I can accommodate the board at 5 o'clock if that's the desire to better sync with staff.
And I'm recommending 5 o'clock so that staff doesn't have half hour of sitting around time.
Yeah, I guess I would, honestly, if staff was working until 5 normal hours, I would have said 5:30. And the reason I would have said that is because if essentially the idea is to be able to allow everybody to finish their day and then gather their documents, prepare and get to the meeting. If the majority of staff is typically finished at 4:30 or earlier, it sounds like we only have one exception to that. And that would give them a half hour to get anything that they need ready for the meeting and bring it to the meeting and arrive at the meeting on time. So if 5 p.m., if you can make 5 p.m. work twice a month, for those, then based on that, then I would probably recommend 5 o'clock. So like I said, had they worked till 5 normally, then I would have said 5:30 to give that little bit of time to get ready. Otherwise you lose a half hour of your day to get ready for the meeting. So in this case, they'll have that half hour to get ready. So I don't know, Ms. Dean, do you have any consideration to add there?
5 is fine for me. I can make my schedule alter for any time. I just want to ensure that those that need to be at the meeting or want to be at the meeting would have sufficient time to be able to get there.
So board, if the consensus is 5, I would just put it as part of the motion that the regular meeting schedule for 2020 will be at 5 p.m. On the 2nd and 4th Monday of each month.
Right.
Okay. I'll make a motion to amend the Beavercreek Township regular meeting schedule for 2020 to reflect that the board regular trustee meetings will be held on the 2nd and 4th Monday of each month at 5 p.m.
I second.
Trustee Dean?
Yes.
Trustee Kretz?
Yes.
Trustee Wallace?
Yes. Thank you very much for everyone working towards a compromise solution here. And we'll go back to Mr. Azaria.
Thank you, Board. I would just like to update the Board on the COVID-19 operations of Beavercreek Township. I'll go through a brief history here. I know I've spoken to everybody individually regarding the operations, and obviously between state and federal mandates and laws that are being passed, this is changing daily. I will tell you that staff, especially our fire department, has been monitoring the situation since this has been in the national news, but really started focusing on operations in January of 2020. On March 3rd, obviously, after hearing the governor speak at his press conference on the concerns for the state of Ohio, we did issue a few plan recommendations regarding sanitizing workstations, additional hand washing. We did purchase additional hand sanitizers and equipment for wiping down stations, as well as a special spray that would even kill COVID-19 that causes the coronavirus. So we've been sanitizing workstations, equipment, and so on since October 3rd. Obviously, on March 10th of this year, I did limit public access to all township buildings. We did post signs at each of the public buildings, including our fire stations. If a resident needed to do work with the townships, for example, submitting a permit, we did issue staff gloves, latex gloves, and mask, and then we put the because of the indications we're getting on the virus living outside of the body for a period of time, we did set up essentially a box where we would quarantine those permits or paperwork or mail for at least 4 days, and then opening it and processing the permits. On March 19th, obviously, we started to see a peak nationwide as well as in the state of Ohio in regards to people and citizens of this country being affected by the virus. At that point, I issued a memo that essentially allowed people to remotely work from home, canceled all non-essential travel for any meetings or trainings that were scheduled. I closed all public buildings, however, staff was still there. We did install a buzz at the government center. We did install a remote buzz system as well as intercom system to allow a resident who couldn't either file permits or get questions answered through the website or phone calls to come on site. We would be able to have that communication without face-to-face. For telecommunicating and board, I have to thank this board and the previous board for some of the software updates and approvals, the new phone system. We've been able to rotate staff from home and in building by using one of the technologies we're using now for this meeting, Microsoft Teams. We've also, with the new phone system that was approved by the Board of Township Trustees, we were able to have an app on their desktop to allow inter-department phone calls from their desktops or laptops from home, screen sharing when we were either through Microsoft Teams or Nextiva. So our staff that are home, they are being productive. They are processing permits. They are continuing to do his business as if they were sitting in the government center. We did rotate staff into the admin building, and that rotation still goes on today with some of those same restrictions. Obviously, the building's being closed, but we are continuing to do business. We're doing code enforcement, inspections as needed, and code enforcement in those areas. Obviously, the fire department has been on the forefront of this. Obviously, we've seen a little bit of decline in calls. I think a lot of residents are taking the federal and state warnings to stay at home and are not going to the hospital because of the concern of the COVID-19. Our dispatch centers for our sheriff's office through Green Central and for our fire department, Beavercreek Police Department, are doing pre-screening and letting, even on fire calls, pre-screening to see if there's any signs or symptoms of the virus. The last thing is our road department operations. They are on a rotating basis, so we have a foreman, a service worker, and a mechanic on an all-call rotation. We are rotating staff in as needed. Essentially, staff has been in the last 3 of the 4 days to address issues in the community. Hopefully we're past the snow season now. We'll have to worry about plowing the roads. For example, road closures, debris that's falling in the road, we're still out there maintaining our buildings as well. We had crews out cutting grass the last couple of days as well. So that's, I'll be happy to answer any questions. It changes daily. I will tell you that staff is having regular meetings regarding the response and all possible contingency plans if it gets worse. We're getting regular information from the county EMA director and the health commissioner. Currently the EOC, Greene County EOC, is up and running through the health department and the EMA director, so we're getting regular information from them, as well as the state of Ohio EOC is up and running, and we're getting information from there as well. The only thing I would like to ask the board for consideration is obviously because it changes on a day-to-day basis and our response changes. I mentioned this in the budget hearings, is that the Ohio Revised Code has changed in regards to limits for the township administrator, spending limits for the township administrator and for department heads. The law went from $2,500, which is currently in place now, to $10,000 as the high limit. I'm asking the board today to at least extend the limit from 2,500 spending limit from 2,500 to 5,000 pursuant to the Ohio Revised Code change. I will be bringing and working with our new fiscal officer an amended or recommended changes to the budget and purchasing policy. We'll include these changes in any other recommendations I have. We'll be changing, because of the new accounting software, VIP, there'll be a lot of policy changes in regards to purchasing, as well as the new budgeting piece that we purchased as well with the, which is what we call, which they call analytics as part of the VIP platform. So I'm asking the board, I'll be answer any questions, but I would like the board to consider to allow myself and the department heads to spend up to $5,000.
Mr. Herring, before we have a discussion regarding that budgetary change, I want to commend you on behalf of the Board of Trustees, and I'll let everybody else talk too, for your exemplary position of what you've done for COVID-19 in the township, but importantly as well as having the insight to bring on the new telephone system and bring it to the board, the new changes you've made so we can communicate virtually for our taxpayers. By having all this new data and information available prior to the epidemic that we're facing has been very insightful for you, and I'm so proud that we have extended your contract and you're working with us. I think that you've taken Beavercreek Township to higher limits in the state of Ohio, beyond Greene County, and we are doing more virtual activity than any city in Greene County and or the state of Ohio in most cases. So you have done an exemplary job on pushing this forward and taking care of our employees and making sure that we as trustees can take care of our citizens. So thank you very much for all the hard work you have put in.
Thank you, board. And it's just not me, and I appreciate that, and it's a team effort from the department heads and recommendations to me. And like I said earlier, I'd like to thank the board as well and the elected officials for all the support. I know there's a lot of questions from the board when we're making these big purchases, but obviously we had to implement a lot of things earlier than what was planned, and testing a lot of systems the last 2 weeks, including the one we're using here. So I appreciate it, and I'll pass it on to staff as well.
Yeah.
Any other comments from the trustees?
I'll echo Ms. Wallace's comments, and the appreciation obviously out to the throughout the departments, every department, because in many cases, as you've commented, Mr. Zaharia, people still drop off building permits. There are needs of the public that are being met, and so we're mowing grass. We're handling with the way that you've structured the departments as far as public requests. I would just ask that we, based on some of the information that came out at the state level and at the federal level, and I understand that that's a moving target, but those numbers that came out yesterday, the trickle-down effect of the mortality rates with what's going on out there is just to maybe take a look at our cemetery systems and make sure that, God forbid, in the event that we are in a situation where we need to accelerate a process for someone, that we're able to do that. So, continue the advocacy you have on behalf of all of Beavercreek, not just Beavercreek Township, but all of Beavercreek with regards to at the county level, at the regional level, as far as EMA, and so just continue those efforts. And you're doing exactly what we hired you to do. So continue to do that, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Hearing no other discussion, can we have a motion regarding the change in limits on the budget resolution?
I'll make a motion to approve to authorize the township administrator and department heads to incur obligations of $5,000 or less on behalf of the township pursuant to Ohio Revised Code, Section 507.11.
Second.
Trustee Dean,
Yes.
Trustee Kretz,
Yes.
Trustee Wallace.
Yeah.
And there is no sunset on this motion. So this will stay in perpetuity until it's changed otherwise, just so everyone is aware of that. So
Yeah, and I'm hoping to have at least after our analytics training, which is scheduled as of right now. Of course, that's all subject to change with the current pandemic. Hopefully to have the policy to you by the first meeting in June.
Okay, thank you.
Board, that's all I have for today. Thank you.
Mr. Kretz, any other comments before we?
I had a couple questions, just more operational.
Investments, I'm sorry.
Oh, yes,
Oh.
yes.
Sorry.
Depository, yes, I apologize. I did have something. Thank you, Mr. Rushing. Board, just to let you also know that the Investment Oversight Committee has continued to meet, and as reported at the trustee meetings from Mr. Kretz, and we have evaluated several options for the township regarding banking as well as investments. The Investment Oversight Committee is recommending that we change our banking to Huntington Bank and start that transition, because that's going to take about 30 days to accomplish, up to 30 days to accomplish. And for investments, we're recommending James Investment, a township company here. They've been involved in the township in the past. They've, and especially in the last, especially with everything going on the state and federal level, they've been sending us information. We also asked them, and they did provide it as a business in the township, to look into the Station 65 project, and they did that at no cost, and did it as a township business. So I do have a resolution here with the recommendation to move to PNC and James Investment.
PNC or to Huntington?
I'm sorry, from PNC to Huntington.
Okay. And then assign James Investment as the investment advisory service.
Correct.
Okay.
We have a motion?
I make a motion to designate the investment manager and primary depository. Whereas Beavercreek Township Investment Committee recently met with a number of financial institutions and investment managers, and whereas the recommendation of Beavercreek Township's Investment Committee is to designate James Investment Research, Inc. as the investment management firm for Beavercreek Township, and whereas the recommendation of Beavercreek Township Investment Committee is to designate Huntington National Bank as the primary depository for Beavercreek Township's active and interim funds, and whereas Fiscal Officer Ryan A. Rushing also supports these recommendations. And now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Township Trustees, Beavercreek Township, Greene County, Ohio, favorably passes the above resolution. Further, be it resolved that all former actions of the Board of Trustees concerning and relating to the adoption of this resolution are being adopted at a duly called and authorized open meeting of the Board of Trustees on the date set forth above, such meeting being duly called pursuant to and in compliance with all legal requirements, including Section 121.22 of the Ohio Revised Code.
Second with discussion. So, Mr. Rushing, with regards to Huntington and our Morgan Stanley account now, will you be initiating the transfer of our essentially investments that are held essentially at as a custodial account at Morgan Stanley? Would be transferring those, initiate the process to transfer those to Huntington?
Correct. You mentioned a good point. The township actually owns the paper for the investments. It's the township's property. So the actual ownership would still remain with the township. As you mentioned, currently Morgan Stanley is the custodial for those accounts. That's removed to James Investment as the custodial to hold those and to recommend the investments to the township. So we would initiate that to move those over as they mature, so that we time it so we're continuously fully invested with the portfolio that we had. The Huntington transfer would actually be, obviously right now PNC holds a lion's share of the township's inactive and active funds that would need to be wired over to Huntington. That may take, as the administrator mentioned, a while, especially with COVID-19. There may be some delay due to just limited up work, but we would initiate that to make sure that all the funds are transferred over.
Okay. So you said James would be the custodial, or Huntington would be the custodial for the investments coming from Morgan Stanley?
James Investments. We would use James Investments would be the advisor, but we can choose Huntington to actually be the bank, if you will, to hold those funds. So okay. they would actually be the custodial account. Thank you for catching that. Yeah,
and I just I'll just throw out a thank you to the Investment Advisory Committee, to Ms. Schultz, to Mr. Zahariev, to Mr. Rushing, and you put in, appreciate the after hours meetings that you attended. But I think at the end of the day, we're going to end up with a much more fluid communication channel. We have a professional advisor that's also a business in the township. And Huntington was able to demonstrate that beyond the operational accounts, that as far as even their second look from their investment managers So kind of a team approach between the township, James and Huntington. It also gives you kind of what we've been asking for as a board. Ms. Wallace, you were part of these discussions last year, the last couple of years with regards to being able to essentially keep the township fully invested and be able to move money back and forth as operational demands require it. But even those operational funds, be able to keep them in an interest-bearing mechanism. So Huntington gave us a couple different proposals. We reviewed those in previous open public meetings, and I think with James, we've got a very dynamic and strong group there. So appreciate the extra effort there on that from those that participated. So,
and Mr. Kretz, I want to thank you for taking the lead on this and working with Mr. Rushing and making sure that the township monies are appropriately invested and that we're receiving the kind of interest and monies that we can do to stretch our taxpayer dollars. So thank you again.
Yeah, I mean, as we've discussed in the past, the earnings that we've been able to achieve over the last few years and what we're projecting going forward, that helps pay for growth as far as when we need additional staff. If you look at some of the salaries we added today, obviously the township's growing. We need to recover from some of the neglect from the past, but we are growing in our needs from a staffing. And so if we can actually earn money on money that the taxpayers have essentially given us as stewards of that taxpayer money, every dollar of interest is a dollar of tax we don't have to ask for. And so I think it's our obligation. So I appreciate the comments, but really it's Mr. Rushing. I appreciate you embracing the concept. So, okay. Otherwise, you can call.
Trustee Kretz?
Yes.
Trustee Dean?
Yes.
And Trustee Wallace?
Yes.
Excellent.
Thank you, Board. And truly, that's all I have for you.
Okay. I had two questions was going back to fiscal. So number one, are we aware of the essentially, Ms. Frick, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the revised code allows for a fiscal officer to maintain records off-site. They don't have to be housed at the township. And so do we believe or are we aware of any records that were moved off-site over the last 10 years that we need to collect back from the outgoing fiscal officer? So whether it's personnel records, whether it's any financial records, is there anything that we need or that we know of or that the current staff in the fiscal office might be aware of? It's something, Mr. Rushing, you might just want to look into that because per Ohio Revised Code, the fiscal officer could maintain records off-site. So the second thing is I would encourage the fiscal office. The board has been asking for years now. The current backup system, obviously, on that UAN is a thumb drive. Is our understanding, is at least take that most recent thumb drive and put that on the network so that we have some historical reference if and when we need to go back to it for any question with the new software versus the old, just so we archive that correctly. And then the last question was relative do we have everything have we cleaned up everything as far as signatories on bank accounts and investment accounts as far as who's designated as the signatory for the township? We have an outgoing fiscal officer and an incoming. So just want to make sure that we've taken care of removing the outgoing and adding you to all of those accounts so that we don't have a situation where you can't, you're not empowered essentially to do something on behalf of the township.
All very good points. I have signed as a signatory for our current depository. I know Mr. Zaharev had me sign for some other documents. It's my full intention to also draft a letter to our vendors to just introduce myself and to ensure that there is a clean delineation between myself and the previous fiscal officer. So if there's any accounts payable needs or anything that has been forwarded to a separate email, to know that I'm the new contact. So I'll definitely add to make sure that we do the same with any other bank accounts, as well as obviously the investments.
Okay. Okay. And as far as offsite records, are you aware of anything that we need to collect?
I'm personally not aware. The old phrase, you don't know what you don't know. So I would yield to staff if they would have any knowledge of that.
Okay. Ms. Frick, are you still there?
I am.
Okay. I'm sure you're familiar, commercial real estate leases, an estoppel certificate.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything that we need to do as far as, and this would be I'm just asking best practice, is there anything we need to do as far as something like an estoppel certificate to vendors saying, this is what we believe we owe you. If there's anything else as of this date, please let us know. Is that normal or not when you have a changing of a fiscal officer?
I would say that's probably not the norm.
Okay.
What we sort of know, it may not be a bad idea in this situation, since we're not entirely sure, because things haven't been entered into the UAN, or at least that's our understanding of where everything stands. It may not.
I'm thinking with his letter, if there's something like an estoppel certificate. I don't know what you would consider it on this side, but essentially saying this is what we believe we owe you, or this is what we have on record. Please confirm. If there's something different, let us know now. So give it some thought. I'm not trying to make extra work, but just again trying to draw the line in the sand between. I presume that there might have been something like that from the state, but maybe they don't think that way.
Well, and the reality is I think with that, it would be helpful so that you know, but I don't think, because the obligation is still the obligation of the township, regardless of which fiscal officer,
Right.
you're still going to owe it.
Right. It doesn't relieve you of the obligation to pay, but at least it would enlighten you to any discrepancy. So,
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Rushing, is just something you might continue a conversation with Ms. Frick, or when you send that letter, it might be helpful. So it might be as simple as sending a copy of a statement or accounts payable report for that vendor saying, this is what we have as of this date. If there's something different, please let us know as soon as possible. So,
sure.
Or give them.
We could even request from all vendors a current statement, just so that that's a very good point.
Yeah, it's just an internal type audit, but just past best practice, I would rephrase what I recommended. I would never recommend saying as soon as possible. I would say give them a specific date to respond by. So give them, plenty of time, but.
Very fair.
Mr. Kretz, I think that those points you made were excellent, which brought up a question to me, to Ms. Frick. Do we need to write a certified letter to the outgoing fiscal officer asking for any property of Beavercreek Township to be returned?
I was going to ask that too.
We could certainly do that. Not that I would have any knowledge, but I certainly am not aware of anything that she has, but it's probably not a bad idea just to document, if there's anything that she still has in her possession, to please return it.
I think that would be a good idea.
Yeah.
Records or property. Yeah, just good housekeeping. Good idea as well.
Is that something you want? Are you saying you want Ryan to do, or something you want me to do?
I would say that.
That's Frick.
Okay. That's fine. I can do that.
And make it certified.
Sure.
But I think that draws a line in the sand on everything. If something would come up in the future, that would be property that we weren't, it would be shame on us if we didn't ask for it. So I think that by drawing a line fiscally, which we've done today, to do that on property as well, cleans up everything and makes us whole, and allows us to start again fresh and with the new fiscal officer, and the new property in the township.
Okay, that can be done.
Okay.
Mr. Kretz, do you have any other comments?
No.
Ms. Dean, do you have any other comments?
Nope, that's it.
Then my last comment would be, Mr. Rushing, congratulations for being here. I think you're already started running in the position, and we're happy to work with you. And I'm looking forward to great things in the fiscal office. So thank you so much for taking an active role prior to you becoming sworn in and being familiarized with all the issues and technology that we have in the township.
Thank you.
Hearing no other comments from any of the other trustees, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Trustee Kretz,
Yes.
Trustee Dean,
Yes.
Trustee Wallace.
Yes. Thank you very much.